Pterosaurs were not dinosaurs. Even though they lived at the same time, looked prehistoric, they belonged to a completely different group of reptiles. If you think a pterodactyl is a dinosaur, you're not alone. Almost everyone gets this wrong. But from their wings to their hip structure, the science tells a different story. Today, we're breaking down exactly what they were and why the dinosaur label is a mistake. First, we need to understand what makes something a dinosaur, because dinosaur isn't just a word we use for any big, scary, extinct reptile. It's a specific group of animals with specific features. Dinosaurs are defined by their bone structure, specifically their hips and legs. All dinosaurs, whether they're giant, long-necked sauropods or tiny feathered raptors, have legs that go straight down from their hips. Their legs are positioned directly underneath their bodies, kind of like how your legs are under you when you stand. This is different from other reptiles, like crocodiles or lizards, which have legs that stick out to the sides. That upright posture is one of the key features that makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. Dinosaurs also have specific hip structures. They're divided into two groups based on hip shape, lizard-hipped and bird-hipped, but both groups still have that upright leg position. But pterosaurs did not have that exact structure. Their anatomy is completely different.
So, if pterosaurs weren't dinosaurs, what were they? Pterosaurs were flying reptiles. That's the simple answer. They were a completely separate group of reptiles that evolved the ability to fly. They lived during the same time period as dinosaurs, from about 228 million years ago until 66 million years ago when the asteroid hit. But they evolved separately. Think of it this way. Dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodiles all had a common ancestor way back in time, but they split off into different branches of the evolutionary tree. Dinosaurs went one way and evolved into the creatures we know: T-Rex, Triceratops, Brachiosaurus. Pterosaurs went a different way and evolved into flying reptiles. Crocodiles went yet another way. They're all related if you go back far enough, but they're not the same thing. It's like how humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor, but humans aren't chimps and chimps aren't humans. Same idea. Let's get into the details of how pterosaurs were different from dinosaurs. First, their wings. Pterosaur wings were completely unique. They were made of a thin membrane of skin and muscle that stretched from their bodies to their incredibly long fourth finger. Yes, finger. Pterosaurs had one finger on each hand that was ridiculously long, sometimes longer than their entire body, and that finger supported the wing membrane. The other three fingers were short and stuck out from the front of the wing. This is totally different from bird wings or bat wings. Birds have feathers attached to their arm bones. Bats have membranes stretched between multiple fingers. Pterosaurs had membranes attached to one giant finger. Second, their bones. Pterosaur bones were hollow and incredibly thin to make them light enough to fly. Some pterosaur bones had walls thinner than a playing card. They were so delicate that we don't have a lot of complete fossils because the bones would often get crushed or destroyed before they could fossilize. Dinosaurs had bones too, and many had hollow bones, but not to this extreme. Third, their stance. Remember how dinosaurs had legs straight under their bodies? Pterosaurs didn't. When pterosaurs were on the ground, they walked on all fours, their back legs and their wings. Their back legs were positioned more to the side, and their wings folded up so they could use their hands to walk. Some scientists think they walked kind of like bats do, awkwardly shuffling on the ground. They were built for flying, not walking.
Pterosaurs came in all sizes, and some of them were absolutely massive. The smallest pterosaurs were tiny. Some were about the size of a sparrow, just a few inches long with a wingspan of maybe 6 inches. They probably ate insects. But the largest pterosaurs were the biggest flying animals that have ever existed. The biggest one we found is called Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of about 33 to 36 feet. For comparison, the largest flying bird alive today is the wandering albatross, with a wingspan of about 11 feet. Quetzalcoatlus was 3 times bigger. It stood about 16 feet tall when it was on the ground. That's as tall as a giraffe, and it weighed around 440 to 550 pounds. Despite being that big, it could still fly because its bones were so light and hollow. Scientists think Quetzalcoatlus might have been a scavenger, eating dead animals, or it might have hunted small dinosaurs and other animals on the ground. So, if pterosaurs weren't dinosaurs, why does literally everyone think they were? A few reasons.
First, they lived at the same time as dinosaurs. The Mesozoic era, the time when dinosaurs roamed the Earth, is often called the Age of Dinosaurs. But pterosaurs were flying around during that whole time too. So were marine reptiles like plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. People just lumped them all together as dinosaur times, even though not everything from that era was a dinosaur. Second, they look prehistoric. Pterosaurs look like something out of a fantasy book. Giant leathery wings, long beaks, sometimes weird crests on their heads. They fit the image of what people think ancient scary reptiles looked like, so they get grouped with dinosaurs in people's minds. If pterosaurs were so successful and some of them were the size of airplanes, what happened to them? Same thing that happened to the non-bird dinosaurs, the asteroid. About 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid slammed into Earth near what's now Mexico. The impact caused massive fires, tsunamis, and threw so much dust and debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun for years. Plants died, herbivores that ate plants died, carnivores that ate herbivores died. The whole food chain collapsed. Pterosaurs couldn't survive that. Most of them probably died in the immediate aftermath. Fires, climate chaos, starvation. The ones that survived the initial impact didn't have enough food to keep going. Within a relatively short time, all the pterosaurs were gone. The only flying animals that made it through were small birds, probably because they could survive on seeds and whatever scraps were left. Big flying animals like pterosaurs needed too much food to sustain themselves. They starved. Were pterosaurs related to birds? Here's another common misconception. People see pterosaurs flying and they see birds flying and they assume pterosaurs evolved into birds. Nope. Pterosaurs and birds are not closely related at all. Birds are dinosaurs. Specifically, birds evolved from small feathered theropod dinosaurs, the same group that includes Velociraptor and T-Rex. Birds and dinosaurs share a direct evolutionary line. Pterosaurs are on a completely different branch. Pterosaurs evolved flight independently. Birds evolved flight independently. Bats evolved flight independently. All three groups figured out how to fly, but they did it in completely different ways using completely different anatomy. This is called convergent evolution, when different species evolve similar traits separately because those traits are useful. Wings are useful, so multiple groups evolved them. But pterosaur wings, bird wings, and bat wings are all structurally different because they evolved from different starting points. Let's wrap up with some cool facts about pterosaurs that might surprise you. First, many pterosaurs had fur. Not feathers, not scales, fur. Scientists call it pycnofibers, and it was a fuzzy covering that helped keep them warm. So pterosaurs were likely warm-blooded, not cold-blooded like modern reptiles. Second, some pterosaurs had crazy crests on their heads. Pteranodon had a long, bony crest that stuck out the back of its skull. Some scientists think the crests were for display, attracting mates or showing dominance. Others think they helped with flight stability, acting like a rudder. Third, baby pterosaurs could probably fly almost immediately after hatching. Fossils show that baby pterosaurs had fully developed wings, unlike baby birds which are helpless for weeks. Pterosaur babies were likely independent right from the start. Fourth, pterosaurs had excellent vision. Their eye sockets were huge, and their brains had large optic lobes, which means they relied heavily on sight to hunt and navigate. They probably had vision as good as or better than modern eagles. If you learned something new today, hit the like button. Subscribe for more videos where we clear up the stuff everyone gets wrong about science and history. Drop a comment telling us what prehistoric animal you want us to cover next. See you in the next one.